My Lords, back in 2020, I was asked to chair a legal forum on this very issue. It involved a number of parliamentarians, a number of leading lawyers, and it was sponsored by the Ozanne Foundation. And it produced a report which was called the Cooper Report, named for a very distinguished lawyer who unfortunately died suddenly, still young, of a heart attack. But Jonathan Cooper it was named for, and he was the founder and an instigator of many of the changes that we've heard discussed today to basically remove the terrible discriminations faced by the LGBT community. The Ozanne Foundation, which had instigated the inquiry, is led by a woman called Jayne Ozanne. Jayne Ozanne is an evangelical Anglican. She's a Christian of deep faith, and she campaigns for LGBTI inclusion and does a lot of incredible work with faith organisations across the piece. And she herself has written and speaks very powerfully about her experiences of being treated to the most terrible form of conversion therapy within her own evangelical community. She was to be cured of her perversion, and it had terrible consequences for her mental health, and she, as a young woman, had a breakdown, and she is an impressive advocate for change, just in the same way as Lord Herbert is, and I know that Lord Herbert knows her. She is now she has shed the shame that she was filled with, and she can give much of the evidence that Lord Herbert has referred to of the terrible damage that has been done to young gay people and young people questioning their own gender identity by virtue of the sort of therapies which we've heard discussed. Now, one of the key purposes of law is to prevent harm, and harm is not confined to physical harm. Although it's very interesting that we've introduced the whole understanding of coercive conduct into domestic violence and into domestic abuse, and recognise that it doesn't have to be about battering someone. But you would be surprised at the number of domestic violence and abusive cases that involve the beating, the first beating for being gay, coming from a member of the family, coming from fathers outraged at the horror of their son possibly being gay, at indications of that, or from older brothers and other family members, or from schoolmates, or for others in the community. And the shame that carries with it lives on, and huge cost to the individual, but also to society as a whole, that self-loathing which has been described. And the mental health consequences are very real, and I could give you case after case of research projects conducted on young people and their suicidal thoughts, their attempts at suicide, their self-harming, and how it is so much greater even than that amongst our ordinary children in our communities who already are showing higher signs of it in these days of social media. So we can't possibly deny the fact that there are problems around this issue. And I'm in the Butler Schloss School on this. I really do think that we have to do something on this. But I also want to pay tribute to Lord Herbert's speech because he described something very important, which is that I echo so much his sense that we've got to stop this business of there being sides. Because I have argued and fought for women's rights all my life, but I also did the first transgender case, transsexual case as it was called then, in 1995 before an international court. And it was to end discrimination in the workplace against transgender people. And so I've lived alongside people and over the years have acted for people who have transitioned in gender terms, and who then have experienced the most vicious assaults, have been raped. And so let's not minimise the consequences of cruelty in our society and our efforts to find ways to deal with it. Now, let me just mention that there are people calling themselves therapists who are healers, counsellors, they call themselves hypnotists, and they promise a cure. So be very clear, we're not talking about praying so that one doesn't have a temptation. We're talking about people promising a cure. And often people are urged to these people, and the numbers are passed to them, and no efforts are being made to prevent that kind of thing, that faux therapy, the quackery that's involved in it. And I should also tell the House that there are people who are sent abroad, just as FGM, we discovered, happened. People are sent abroad in order to have conversion therapy done, people from minority communities. And so when we say we don't hear about any of this, it is closeted. We don't hear about it because it's kept closely under wraps. And I do think that we should be clear that this is a problem, this is a serious problem, and that some of the debates which I want to take part in around the health issues, the research that needs to be done about the possible consequences or hormonal treatments and so on, I think those should be discussed. But I think that's a separate issue from whether we would allow people to be faced with this kind of disgraceful and punitive treatment, so-called treatment. I also want to pay finally a tribute to Baroness Hunt. I thought her speech was moving, affecting, and it was with great humanity and compassion that she delivered it. Let us find our humanity and compassion. Let's not be divided on this sort of issue. We must find the best ways to prevent people being harmed. That's what this is about. Yeah.